Sly and Rabbit coming through with Bonnie Brown, you know, say, we want to make a big apology to Nomads. I'll tell you. Nomads, what have you done? I owe you 2, I owe you 3. Trust me, I owe you 5, 10, and 11. Yeah, man, believe you me, I owe no big time. Big time I owe no. I don't know what me I talk about still, but me don't know it's what go on, so. I don't know it's what go on, so boy, but I will apologize. Nomads with Sly and Rabbit. Here goes. Is this Cutting Edge and IRFM there with you? And next Wednesday. You know, say last week we don't play a thing, but through the computer where we have the thing and everybody that work, we'll have to resort to our next computer. But now we get back the computer. Give thanks to Cuban. We want you know Cuban, you know, for rescue me. Big up Cuban for rescue me. Trust me, man. May I tell you, you rescue me good time. So we have the computer, you know, we have the thing where we do and play. So we're going to play it tonight as part of a revision. Because, you know, say sometimes we're going to the revision, but as we said, this is the 25 years celebration of IRFM. And we're there for 23 long time that, you know. Trust me, a long time. 23 years we're there. I try to get the people, them brains unwashed. We try to unwash the people, them brains, but why may I tell you, people, them brains hard, Rasta. Hard. But we still continue the journey because, you know, it's a good must overcome evil and victories where we are dealing with now. We're not dealing with no failure business. You know, not failure. When I work with the failure thing, because we see the fruits of our labor still. We see it develop into certain things, and even though it could have to go further, but we feel good for know, say, at least some ones and ones out there take it serious and push it further. Even the youth, them by YouTube, SRL and all them big radio station, they brethren just come check me a while ago from London there, where you know, say, and them man, they make people in England know, say, Muta Baruch have a program named Cutting Edge. And when you go to England, and that the people them have a cell on the roadside. Believe you me, I kid you not. You understand? And now we hear say Cutting Edge is heard in 150 different countries all over the world that you know. Yeah man, for one program here in 150 different country is really something. So we heal it up because as we say it help over the years, it help. And we give thanks to that. And we're still there. Yeah, we're still not putting no hole in the IRFM pocket. Mr. Young used to say, Muta Baruka, I do business where you want doing as long as you don't put no hole in my pocket. Well, we never put no hole in Mr. Young pocket for 20 odd years. We don't really want to put no hole in nobody pocket, you know, but you don't know, say, hole can go in a pocket because of things where you say. And things where people don't like where you say it. You understand? So, but we kind of get over certain things. We kind of understand the thing more clear and all. So we don't think we want to put no hole in no one pocket. But you know, say, my head kind of giddy. I don't know if I behave myself sometimes. You understand? I really don't know if I behave myself. So we want to play the song, yeah? We played the other day, we want to play it now because my feel says that sweet rendition of a tune I love for a long time, you know. I love that tune a long time. I know me here at Jamaican youth out of Portmore production come to this tune here. And I love the tune. And I hope you love it too. This is the Cutting Edge. Yeah, this is the Cutting Edge. You know, say, some things are going in the so-called Middle East, the way. Even though it is a far from way, but it have some serious indirect relationship with how we run our life, yes, and how we're going to run our life, yes, you know, because we see this group here named ISIS, Olampan 2 Japanese, and I demand $100 million, which you know, say them not really serious about that. But the problem with it is that it look like them kill one of the Japanese, them and one left now, and them a demand that a woman who related to Baghdadi, the leader, who did strap on a bomb on her for blow up and it never explode. So them all her and lock her up. The Jordanians, them have her. Now, them a demand, this is a terrorist group now, so-called terrorist group where seem to be doing some things like a government. Them a demand the release of this woman for the Japanese. But meanwhile, them do that, them all on a Jordanian pilot. Now, this is very interesting, you know, because them all on a Jordanian pilot, them have the Japanese, them are actually release of the woman for the Japanese. But here the Jordanian, them put, the Jordanian, them put the thing in some serious mix up and blender, you know. The Jordanian, them say, all right, here what we're going to do. We're going to release the woman if you give it back our pilot. We should have nothing to do with the Japanese. We should have nothing to do with the Japanese, man, you know. So the Japanese, them now in a serious dilemma now because they have to attack the Jordanians, them. They might try and make some contact with the ISIS people, them. And the Jordanians, them might say, all right, here we know. Why, you know, so me not really business with the Japanese man, you know, business with our pilot. So you ask the ISIS them now. If you release our pilot, we give the woman. So we don't know what happened to the Japanese man, you know. Or really and truly, we don't even know what happened to the pilot. Because the man, they do them thing that just to get some publicity and them have a PR thing we are going for them, we're not easy. We're not easy, you know. And the weirdest part of it, you know, a whole heap of them man there, you know, is all time Saddam Hussein, big soldier them, from them time there, who get disgruntled over what's going on in Iraq, you know, and start to rise up. So we're going to see how that pan out, you know, because apart from that, because we see some really weird things are going on. The president, what them call him, the prime minister for Israel there, him get invitation from the opposition party, the Republican them, in America, to come to America, come make speech. And don't feel no way if the Democrat them no vex about that, you know. Because you're going to invite a president come our country to come talk. And it's not the government of the country invite him there. The government of the country don't have nothing to do with him. But meanwhile, he might do that, you know. He might plan now to go raise a war against Hezbollah. That's why I say now, some things are going down there so where even though they're far from way, but the implications is very serious because apparently them kill a Hezbollah soldier. The Israeli them kill a Hezbollah soldier and an Iranian soldier. And then Hezbollah now go kill 2 Israeli soldiers. And the Israeli them are going to retaliate against Hezbollah. It's a serious thing, you know. Because this can be a real outright war, you know. You don't understand where I'm going on this. So this can be an outright war. Because it's like kill for kill. And who can kill the most? And Hezbollah is not like the other one them in a Palestinian, the Palestinian, what them call them, the other group there, where run the place. It's not like them, you know, them Hezbollah man, I get some serious backing from other places. Meanwhile, the king of Saudi Arabia dead, and the next man take over for him. Meanwhile, Yemen is in turmoil, topsy-turvy now, confusion. Even though they're far from we, you know, we might up here, so now make everything look fine and dandy, you know, but everything we are going there, so, you know, go have a direct relationship to America And you know, when it affect America, it affect we. Because the thing we're going in France the other day, where you hear the big alabaloo about, you know, is nothing compared to where the man them have under them cap a plan. You see how much plane have turn back the other day last week? Delta Airline, JetBlue, them have to escort JetBlue, 2 JetBlue flights out of the air. Delta have to turn back because bomb scare upon the plane. Some man call in bomb scare. Then them find a little drone. I don't know where I'm going, you know. A little drone land upon the White House lawn. A little man come forward and say, boy, you want this a little toy thing we didn't have, you know, but they might examine it and say, this toy thing could have carry certain things upon it. So we don't know if it's really a toy thing as card to where we are here, but an actual drone land upon the White House lawn. Meanwhile, Obama daughters was there. The implications is devastating. So we say, I will leave a little things that each up around the corner, you know. Meanwhile, you have what the Boko Haram, them now are trained children. You remember when they did train, you remember when the Sierra Leone uprising did go on, them did have what children, soldiers. Years ago we play a tape. When the Sierra Leone thing did really depend on the news front. We did play a tape about children soldiers. Well, these Boko Haram people, them are trained some little children with, hey, if you see little people with some long AK-47 in them and are trained in Rasta for soldier, for kill people. And them are trained little girls now, 10-year-old girl, tie and bomb on them, for stand up in a certain marketplace and remotely control, blow up, hey. But I don't know what kind of people them the Rasta. Believe you me. Me don't know what kind of heart or what kind of thinking in the name of God according to them. Allah Akbar. I want to know what is it? Well, we know sometimes we drive the people them still. Sometimes it's desperation and oppression. But for a man reach that level there, you know, where him a tie and bomb and children for go blow up in a market, you know. But it's mind-boggling, Rasta. Mind-boggling. And for sure, you have a next set of black people now, like for instance, the ANC. There was a thing with the ANC, you know, them did have a rule during the time of apartheid, you know. Apartheid, the ANC have a rule, you know, where them bomb up buildings and not people. Yeah, that was a different fight going on, so where them thing was to bomb up buildings and not people. So them would have really target some buildings and make sure it's nobody not in the building and blow up the building and left the people them. Meanwhile, white people have bomb where kill people and left building. Them call it the neutron bomb, where it kill people and left building. And now we say, in the name of a religion, man, I thought Sharia law, them want to put up the whole thing, you know, really is a hardcore religious belief. And you know, so every age where we go through, you know, you have religions that come up with these little things, you know, especially Christianity or Islam. That Christianity, they have feel like a time when it's a show you say, well, right now, if you go against the Pope, you're going to get burned. And you have to prove, say, you're not rich, and you have to prove, say, you're not warlock, and you have to prove this, prove that. And you have to make swear to this and all them something there. So Europe go through that stage of sacrificing people in the name of God and the name of Jesus. And now we say, so-called people who claim to them is Muslims are defend them religion to the point of murder. Yes, and them no see it as murder neither, you know. Them see it as getting rid of the infidels. And anybody who is not, well, as a matter of fact, it's not anybody who is not Muslim, you know. Because Muslim, in the gun sight of a whole heap of them too. It's not only that anybody is not Muslim, you know, but anybody though hardcore Muslim to the core, they will kill you too. Because whole heap of the people them who them are, you have Sunni and the Shiite them. And the two of them are Muslim, you know, but you know, so them are murder, what are they? And then you have up at the top of Europe, you know, you have the Ukraine and Russia, and the Russian armed rebels them, who have murder people up there so too. That is a part where you say white people kill white people, even though they might tell you say white people not kill white people, but you want see we are going up at Ukraine there. And people forget say the worst war in human history, World War I and World War II, is white people that kill white people. Even though people say, well, you never see black people, you never see white people that kill white people. It's not true. It's not true. White people have killed white people for a long time. Long time. And that is depicted in World War I and World War II. So them just celebrate 70 years of what them call it, the thing in Germany there. The Holocaust thing where survivors there. Some survivors they are celebrate. And them have them story to tell. But it's a serious thing. Serious thing I go on. I don't know what I go pan out. Because you know, say that the West side them a try bring what them call Armageddon for claim say them a fulfill Bible. Which is them a make it, you know. Yeah, them a cut off them foot for match the shoes. So the more it come, the more people look into the Bible and say, see there, are the last days this. Well, you know, the last days they are 1,000 years ago. Right, something's funny, you know. You know what I say? 1,000 years ago, the real things the terrible people that say the last days. People that say them can't take no more, you know. And the last days, God have come from earth, you know. Even all, when you hear about all the bubonic plague, Europe, during the time of the bubonic plague, them did feel say it was the revelation of Jesus Christ now going to fulfill itself now because the way they devastate Europe, you know, millions of people are dead. Them did feel say this is it now, this is the end of time now, this is it. You couldn't tell them say this is not it, this is it. Well, you see them go through and survive now for go oppress other people and turn people into slave and all them something there. So them not even in nothing about no last days again. And black people, you know, and they talk about last days. Every time something wrong with black people, they talk about, boy, God soon come from earth. The way the people, them wicked, God soon come from earth. And every generation, people that say God soon come from earth. And you have people actually live for that. Yeah, man, you have people that live for that, you know. Put all of them faith and hope that one day, as a matter of fact, you know, most Americans believe, say, they will go in at the time when Jesus, when the rapture happen. Most Americans believe that. Most Americans who believe in this Christian thinking, believe that them going to live in at the time when Jesus come back. Can you believe that? And you have black people sitting here, so I think the same thing, you know. Every time something go wrong, them say, see the Almighty God, Jesus will come back from earth. Man heart go hard like stone. But man heart was stone for a long time. It's just that we live in a time now when we can say that. Who can tell maybe 100 years ago, or sorry, 100 years from now, it's going to be even more devastating, and then it's still never see nobody a come from the earth. Because here man talk about the earth plan destroy the planet and the planet. Man can't destroy the planet. No care much plastic buckle in putting at the earth. It can't destroy the earth. But here what it going to do? It going to destroy human being. Because life will get so miserable for human being to survive on earth. that you're going to have a planet of the apes. For those of you who know about that story, when them send the man in this ship and him end up in a land where ape rule. Ape is like human beings. And the ape them start to angle them like them is all the ape, all the animal, all man used to angle the ape. But guess what? Him see the Statue of Liberty under the sun. And him realize that him never gone on a different planet and still Earth him to depend. Earth him to depend still him never know, say. And the same Earth him depend. But when him look, him say, apes are rule. Apes have intelligence and all them thing there. So, we I say that, believe it or not, the way all the thing are going on now, you know. Look how much animal man eat. look how much cow man eat. How much goat man eat. How much bird man eat. All we know say, a little plan now, them now conjure up some plan. All we know say the cow them now organize up themselves to telepathic communication because we lose all that telepathic communication, you know. We have to buy phone card. We have to buy phone card to communicate. Maybe the cow them and the goat them and the bird them never lose that. So who to tell? Maybe them a conjure up some conspiracy against human beings for all them murder where them commit against the animal them. All the season when them talk about a bird season. You know, recently we tell you about the scientists them say 50 years from now, you're going to have rat. We're big. Like dog and cat. Well, I kid you not. I kid you not, and I have the picture to prove it too. And I can't tell you which part of the picture there. But you know, a man hear me talk about this on the radio, you know, and him say, Muta Baroka. You see where you are said there, about 50 years from now, me going to tell you about something we go on just the other day in New York, in the Bronx. Them find a rat, not even one rat, it's not even one rat. Come here, tell you the truth, you know, the biggest rat them me see, I know in Jamaica, you know, the biggest rat them me see are in the subway in New York City. Me I tell you, the biggest rat them me ever see are in the subway in New York City. But listen to this. Listen to this now. The brethren send me an article where them find some rat in a Bronx, in a shoe store, where measure from them head to them tail 36 inches long. Yeah, 36 inches. You know what 36 inches is? That is 1 yard. You know how much 1 yard is? Hold out your hand sideways from your tip of your finger to your mouth. Because so we measure cloth in Africa. A so cloth measure in Africa. When you want to know 1 yard of cloth, you hold out the cloth, stretch out your hand, and hold it at your mouth, and that's a 1 yard. Now look at your hand, look at your tip of your hand to your mouth. The man them find some rat in a Bronx. We measure 1 yard from mouth. The man kill one of them and hold it in him hand, you know, that me look on the rest of me and say, but no, if me ever see a rat like that in my house, you know, me not stay in the house there, you know. If me ever see a rat like that in my house, me I find somewhere else to go live. Because it means I know one of them there. And me I want to wake up one night and when me open my eye, me see a rat eye face my eye. Can you imagine you open your eye in your bed and when you look, you see two eyes look by you? And I know your wife or your husband is a rat. You hear your dog a ball and when you look downstairs, it's a rat that kill your dog. When you know that the dog supposed to kill the rat. Or when you look, you have two puss in your house. And the rat that kill your puss. what's a horror? It's like a horror thing, you know, but it's a real thing. It's a real thing. Me have the picture of them in my computer. The man, them find rat in a Bronx. I think it's a Foot Locker store too, you know. I have some store named Foot Locker store. Them find the rat is 36 inches long. When the man they measure it from head to tail, to the head of them tail. Believe you me, how do we know that these rat, because rat sensibly, you know? Rat, hey, you think, what time of the interview? 11 o'clock, yes. You know, you think, say, you remember them rat chop where you used to each a little thing pan it, and bend it, twist it up, and push a little metal in it, and it all up, and you hope say a rat go on and eat it, and it lick the rat head, and then now it kill the rat. You think say them rat chop, they can't catch rat again? You are mad if you think say a rat. Yes, after all these times and ages, you really believe say a rat don't know about that now? You really believe say a rat don't know say for him grandparents and him ancestors, the amount of him ancestors were dead with a rat trap there. Him must know about that now. So them have to devise some other rat trap. I mean, them have some really weird. You know, one of the best rat trap me see right now is the one with sticky, you know. I'll tell you, the one they not easy. A rat stand up on it, they done with it, you know, him just lay this up. Yeah, pick it. All right, because part this reason they have come forward. This is the cutting edge on RFM. All right, here goes. We're going to switch from rat talking and Pamal to a celebration that will be taking place this Sunday, right down there, North Street and Orange Street corner there. Big yard, them call it. We have Lego. Yeah, Lego. How you do?
Yeah, I'm Bridget. Remember, King?
No, you know, say, I know you're the man who are hold on upon this Dennis Brown thing for years, and as you say, it has grown so much that now we have two different things are going for Dennis Brown downtown.
Sure.
And now IRFM on board, we know, say, IRFM are going to have a big yard, and then them still going to have the concert downtown, though, don't it?
Yeah, on the 22nd, right.
Oh, they move it to the 20th. Oh, last year they keep the 22nd, though?
No, they keep about the 17th or the 18th. One of them days.
Okay, all right. So why how that goes? Tell me how that goes. Because I know it do get too big for big yard still, but why got it on the 22nd?
Yeah, no, it get too big up there and thing, you know? And we have to move it down to the waterfront. Are you kind of predict to your motor?
A long time.
Are you the predict, you know, because you don't keep saying, boy, waterfront.
Yeah,
but how funny it is, you know? You see, when you attack that the year there?
Yeah.
It's like I vision, you know, say D Brown, I drive and go back up D Brown in a place, right? And when I back up D Brown in the place, D Brown said to me, Mr. D Brown, oh, you make me keep things here and people them say dead, I ain't not dead. I said to me, say, God, let's go on the way, because I go down on the whole harbor, go on with that thing, you know. So let's go on the way, though.
Yeah.
And eventually they show it down at the whole harbor, because the whole harbor that in it.
Yeah, of course, Victoria Pier in the whole harbor, man.
Yeah, the whole harbor, man, right down the center of the whole harbor.
Yeah.
And they set up right away. The wharf that belonged to not Wherry Wharf. The wharf which was end up first at Church Street Wharf.
Yeah.
Yeah, it ended up at Church Street Wharf, which was a lumber yard. Well, them used to bring the lumber, them coming
big
from.
Big boat, on the boat, them.
Yeah, on the boat, them there.
Yeah, all right.
The lumber boat, the Kirk nail boat.
And when I use to dive up money down at Victoria Pier there, you know. Well,
yeah, man. I think, man, I don't go some learn to swim, you know. Not the lane, not the little water will come up, not the lane, that's why, you know.
And you know, so you could have look and see the bottom of the water them days there.
Yeah, man, that's true, man.
Yeah, Merkel Bank over
watch the money I come down, but you have to dive on like and catch it when it come up, you know?
You know,
me
wait till it sink, man, and dive down there. Believe, all down Merkel Bank there. But, all right, so, North Street.
Well, you have to up the two things now, motor, right? So go up on the waterfront. The people them up there so boy I think for going for D Brown and things. So last year now it's like was the D Brown birthday. Saturday was D Brown birthday. So Sturgraph link up with Uri and I said, well, cause Uri come to me and cause originally when Dennis said that, you know, Uri did play Exodus, Nuclear, Jammys, and Jack Scorpio. They used to play Orange Street and Black it out same way. So you Sturgraph come and say, well, let's go keep the thing. I say, yeah man. And I ate that as the birthday thing and it keep and but it was well attended.
Yeah.
Well attended, may I tell you, man, and the police said we give it till 2 o'clock. So this year the people are looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So Sunday now coming is D Brown birthday.
Yes.
The 1st of February. So we'll put it on back again, you know. But this time we are gonna have
So
we are gonna have a little band too, you know. A little band named Exodus Revolution. I'm gonna do some tune after IRFM finish.
All right, IRFM supposedly from 2 to 6, I think, with
yeah, with Bob Clark.
And then what happen after 6 now? What happen? The sound system them how come said we Thurgoff and them sound there?
No, not Sturgraph. You're gonna use with the soul tone.
Okay.
Yeah, cause I remember when we start by the D Brown thing 2009 now.
Yeah.
And it come start play, you know?
Yes.
And then with a D Brown bridging same way, you know?
Yeah, so that's how we go until whatsoever will the people them decide. Say,
yeah, well, you could have get it till about hopefully 1 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
But you know, say, well,
yeah.
on a Sunday night, it's a 12 o'clock thing, you know?
Yeah, okay, all right. So, well, I'm glad to hear say IRFM really come on board on the level that stage.
Yeah, come on board.
It's sweet.
Yeah, it's come on board.
That means, you know, to the people that come there from the day because Bob Clark live out there. With the big sound. Yeah, and, you know, Dennis Brown straight. All right. So tell me exactly what the day are going to look like. You know, what going to really happen? I mean, all right, so IRFM are there from 2. Bob Clark have spin music and a talk and I have guests and them something there. And then you say the next set will come.
Yeah, we have a little band named Exodus Revolution. It's a young band where we start downtown there, you know?
Okay. With which artists them? Are those artists from the area? Artists from the area?
Yes, artists from the area and 1 and 2 other come in, you know?
Yeah.
They're from Sweden.
Yeah.
And me and Junior Natural and Aki and Saltfish and Rush. You have a policeman there. In bad motor.
Yeah.
The man bad from D Brown, for the Central Police Station.
I think give me 2 CD though. I think I even see one come down, so come give me 2 CD, man.
Yeah, and Jabuk supposed to come in, you know?
Yes. All right, and you said that I supposed to end maybe 12, 1 o'clock by the level.
Yeah, about 12, so you know?
I
don't know, sir. I don't pick up the thing them yet, but I know the idea to be picked up. I don't know the time.
Yeah.
After Saturday, I'll give a call. We're supposed to meet with them tomorrow.
And then still I go block off the road from go right down to Charles Street.
They were blocked from Charles Street. Charles Street go to the work agency came and look at the place today, and then they wanted to see the run. And so the bus them could have turned because they wanted to say if the place was big enough and everything is okay now. They pick up everything over the weekend by now and started all of the permits and things they're in place.
Yes, glad to hear that. All right, so you know, so we have a down the said way because you know it's our year and it's not Sunday night.
Yeah, I think you know.
So we have got down there, so and yeah, all right. So we want the people them know that IRFM a broadcast live first time from Dennis Brown celebration. Big yard.
The birthday dance. We call it the birthday dance, you know?
The birthday dance. All right,
yeah, the birthday dance.
Roadblock from North Street to Charles Street, roadblock car.
Yeah.
Hey, but me remember one time the stage show keep it and a weird dog at the bottom of the road, me see people.
But more time, you like, you know, me used to tell Judah Lincoln, so this thing and not stop till they reach seaside, you know.
No, me I tell you, man, one year me go down there, me I say, but wait, this not normal, Rasta. People go
Shaggy said to Shaggy come here to come work today.
Yeah.
And the gang them, you know?
Yeah.
And Shaggy see and said, then they better get no sponsor. I said, no, brother. He said, well, I have to bring in some people for you. But the place too small.
Yeah. But no sponsor. The sponsor them did pull on, never hold on pandas at all. But only get sponsored for next 2 weeks time.
And the gang them, you know?
Yeah.
And Shaggy see and said, then they better get no sponsor. I said, no, brother. He said, well, I have to bring in some people for you. But the place too small.
Yeah. But no sponsor. The sponsor them did pull on, never hold on pandas at all. But only get sponsored for next, 2 weeks time though, 3 weeks time.
Well, yeah, because it work, we work, and that show work with Jaria still, you know? The downtown
No, but
show.
I mean private sector. I'm not saying about Jaria. I'm not saying about private sector. Them not come on.
But you know what thing we are keep?
Downtown. No, not the 120 at the 20. The one downtown man on the wharf, yeah.
Yeah, the one we downtown on the wharf, and we do it with, between we and Sounds and Pressure and Jaria. It's a coordination, you know? We do it, that one.
Yeah, but when I say, who you just call a brethren and brethren, that's about the private sector.
Well, we don't get that from private sector. No. 1 year we get Kentucky did come in and with Cinco.
Okay. Well, then they're on board again. Them come off of the board.
Well, them come off. Them the police still, you know.
Okay.
But like me say now.
Yes. I just Jaria and...
Jaria did it to the organizer and get the artist and thing and come on a Jaria. At first, when we start up Orange Street, you know, give praise to Mr. Campbell. He never there with Jaria at that time, but him bring in some tents and thing and give it. And Fred them was a Jaria and them come in and help, you know?
Yeah.
And Dennis Howard and them and them.
Yes.
Was a community effort, you understand?
Yes.
Just to build our own stage and put everything together, you know?
All right, yes.
But we get a whole pair for them to be more.
Oh, you mean, man, the concert was nice last year, man. Nice.
Yeah, man.
So I look forward to this live broadcast, trust me, because, you know, so when RFM come out anyway, you know, it's a guaranteed ram jam up business are going on.
And, yes, and hopefully, if a lot of the people will grow with D Brown, some of the big man and big man, they will grow with D Brown.
Yes.
You know about him more than me.
Yeah.
Made them and them grow up together.
Yeah.
All him first girlfriend and all him way there. And them look forward to each other.
All right, so we give thanks also we are saying our IRFM live on North Street and in between North Street and Charles Street, call
Charles
it
Street, Orange Street, yeah. Beach Street to call it, you know?
Yeah.
Original Beach Street.
No, please most of the kind that fit down there.
Huh?
Shaking up on Orange Street.
Yeah.
No, Prince Buster. I remember Prince Buster already there. Right at the corner.
Prince Buster, let me find my place, you know.
No, me know Prince Buster. That means, but him round the corner to road at Charles Street. So.
Yeah, me go on the, yeah, and Scratch Perry.
Yes.
Paxton, Bonnie Lee.
Augustus Pablo's up there, so.
Augustus
Beverly's cross the road over there, so.
Beverly's Success Record.
Yes.
Martins at Caribbean. Then we get the place down the road to buy for Bob Marley. Yes. Then I get the press plant. They'd have Chin's Radio down the road.
Yes.
And Palmer's there. The Jet Star England.
You have techniques down the back. Yes. Everywhere, everybody, Derek Carrot, King Street and Bison and Charles Street corner there, so. Bison Street and Charles Street. Derek Carrot, one stop.
No, that's King Street.
King Street and
Bison Street.
With Tough Gang, they have Bison Street and Chancellor Lane, that's all, right at the corner there, so.
No, that's not Tough Gang, man. Channel 1.
No, wait, no, man. Between King Street and Charla and Chancellor
Lane. And Street between Chancellor Lane.
Yeah, Tough Gang did there, so man.
Yeah, Tough Gang did there, so Key Touch did there, so.
Yeah, and
Channel 1 come build them press plant right there at the center.
Yeah, and African Museum down at the corner there, so with Randy's down there, so too.
Yeah, Randy's.
People around that area. So how them not revive up, Bram? I mean, me know hear some jingles and all them, man.
I think then young Chris Chin was talking down a Rebel Salute and whoever kind of tourist thing going through the area, you know? Right? Some of the historical places, the Foresters Hall, the Liberty Hall, Kingsland, and all the dance hall, you know, see? So what kind of tour carry them? There's a Nanny's Corner, Lovely, and which Coxon we start from.
Yeah.
And then they carry them down to Liberty Hall, War Theatre, Randy's, and come up back the road. So I was talking to Chris and telling him to fix up upstairs because all of the equipment around this have all of them to make still inside of the place.
Yeah.
But them under dust.
Yeah.
You know, see it?
Yeah. Anyway, we look forward to this thing. We look forward to it.
Yes, okay.
Dennis Brown tribute. The first.
That's the one downtown. This one is Dennis Brown birthday, dad.
Dennis Brown, all right. Dennis Brown birthday, but this Sunday.
Yeah.
Kicking off from 2 with IRFM, yes. And then.
With the soul tone. I will play. All right. And after 6 now, you have.
All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now, you have. All right. And after 6 now the party swinging said way, go right till you say when.
Band names Exodus Revolution.
All right, so give thanks, Bridget. But we have to remember, say you have studio down there too.
You don't know that you're a place you come to. You make most of send me a letter, you know.
People scored 1 and 2, man.
Yeah, people scored.
And people don't say you're right.
Like me produce the tune, yeah. Yeah, and come out the road and me buy five.
And him tell me say him no mind it. Him tell me say him no mind it, you know.
But him make a liar send me a letter, but me not pay that.
Me see my England, them say, boy, Mota, if I was somebody else, you know, it's not see you, you know, but it's try you. Everything cool still. So, brother, when I say the letter.
From them time, from them time, at the early time, I'm not paying the mind.
Yeah.
That actuator.
All right, sir. So, anyway, keep talking.
They're them good still. Me there the other day in a bus time.
The studio still run nice, though.
No, I really go on the street. I look at some look at you, but them go on to some production, but, you know, some look at you, but them go on, because I know motor. Opportunity have to create for you, you know, and get you know, some motor gunman, you know.
Yeah, that's what I say.
You know, see, if you create opportunity for enough youth, but a chance you have to take, and that comes to enough youth. Not a garrisonization, you know.
Yeah.
You get an opportunity, so him just take chance, and just live where him learn, and go do anything, and you know, see the Virgin.
Yeah, man.
And that them do it, because the people just capture place, because them not a civic pride to take care of nothing.
Yeah.
You know, see, Virgin, and that the politician them do it.
Yeah.
So go and bless the bread.
Anyway, give thanks, bread. I'm glad to see you sometime down West Street too.
Yeah, but when I talk to the man, the crowd down the prayer, you have to park up and make the next man play.
No, the crowd tick. Well, you know the crowd, at 2 o'clock the crowd get tick, you know, trust me.
Let me come, and them time me come in at 2 o'clock, you know.
Yeah, the crowd's
tick. And like after me coming, the boy, I see the people look up, be like, like a storm, man.
Me I tell you, man.
Yeah, man. Let me say, boy, you have to take a race and make a next man take a...
one time I look downstairs now, I see the amount of car come up the road and I say, wait, this is where I go on out there. So when I look, the place jam up, we could hardly see nobody.
So we done a real town and the police come back
at 2 o'clock.
Everybody does it for this.
Yeah. All right, Virgin, give thanks, yeah?
Yeah, give thanks and guidance and protection, brother.
Yeah, man. Lego, man, my brethren, from a longer time. You know, people scored part 2 about the preacher. Them a film vice upon it, you know. Yeah, a film vice upon it. This Sunday, IRFM, live. When we say live, I mean live. You go down there, Neil?
Yes, sir.
Come here, bring that, come give me. Yeah, you go down there? No, me serious, no, me ask if you go down there.
Sunday?
Yeah.
Me are there town Sunday, man.
No, me not ask if you go there town, me ask if you go down at... Oh, the man, what kind of ambiguous... No, me never say if you go there town, me ask if you go down at the celebration.
Yes.
You go down there?
Yes.
Alright, you go taking some Dennis Brown show from Bob Clark. I know say Bob Clark will play Dennis Brown show when you never hear before.
Big fan.
Eh? Sunday, February 1st, Bob Clark, live from Big Yard on Orange Street, Kingston, from 2 p.m. to 6. And you can watch it free online too. IRFM.net. So, yes, Dennis Brown 58th birthday bash. Right down there, so between North Street and Charles Street. You can't miss it. Trust me. There's no way you can miss it. Okay, this is the Cutting Edge on IRFM. You know, say, Cutting Edge, I celebrate Black History Month next week. We're going to start celebrate Black History Month as of next week. So, you can look out for some serious reasoning and interjection of tapes. And as we say, don't be surprised, we're going to play some tapes we play from a longer time, but it really have an effect on the people them. And we know, say, new listeners you know, people who hear already never did hear it before, people who never hear it before hear it now. So we want you to look out for that. You have 4 Wednesday in February. So we are going to celebrate Black History Month, Cutting Edge Black History Month celebration that take place. Okay, so we're going to go back to Pamal and then we bring in the thing we want. We're carrying go to college, theological college tonight. Yes, I don't know. All right, yes. We're carrying go to theological college tonight. them information, you can't get it at university sometime. But you can get it right here. And we have played it before. We're going to play it again. The fee says a very important tape. Very, very important. Given the reasonings about what in the Bible, what wrong, what right, if you should accept this or accept that. Some people's fundamentalists, like the ISIS people, they would go out the Bible, you know. Is it politicians are religious people? May I tell you, man, they're not easy, you know. Politicians are religious people. Anyway, it don't know much about the Bible. You know, so most people have Bible in their house, but them not read it. And most people quote the Bible, and when you ask them which part of the Bible, them say that, them don't know. It's like me hear a man the other day, a man who's supposed to know, he must say, the 3 wise men, and no, none of the Bible tell you about no 3 wise men, and then you know them have all things about Eve eat apple, and the Bible not tell you nothing about no apple. But this is the way it go. A whole heap of people regurgitate things over the years. And when you ask them which part it is, them say in the Bible, but them don't know which part of the Bible they because really and truly, not like that, no in the Bible, not 3 wise men, no in the Bible, no apple, no in the Bible. But people keep saying these things. So we want to clarify certain things out of this thing here tonight. We're going to replay something that we played before. So make we line it up, but we're going to go back to Pamal.
Hello, this is Ken Davis. When I was in the 6th grade, a building was going up across the street from my school. Like most 10 or 11-year-old boys, I preferred watching bulldozers in action and concrete being poured to whatever was being written on the blackboard. I spent a lot of 6th grade gazing out the window. I don't think I learned anything that year. The red brick structure I watched rising with such absorbed fascination was a church. Unlike the soaring Gothic cathedrals of Europe, or the formidable stone church my family attended, this was not a typical church. It was being built in the shape of a mighty boat. Presumably it was Noah's Ark. Most of us have a mental picture of Noah's Ark, and we all think it looks like a cute tugboat with a little house on top. Except that Noah's Ark didn't look anything like that. You can look it up yourself. Right there in Genesis, you'll find God's little instruction book, a set of divine plans for building an ark. Unfortunately, like most directions that come with bicycles or appliances, these are a little sketchy, providing little more than the rough dimensions of 300 by 50 by 30 cubits, or roughly 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. God told Noah to add a roof and put in 3 decks. Beyond that, God's instructions came without a diagram, unless Noah threw away the blueprints when he finished. So we should count Noah putting this thing together in time to beat the rains as one of the first miracles. Many years after I gazed out that classroom window, I discovered that the original Hebrew word for ark literally meant box or chest in English. In other words, Noah's Ark actually looked like a big wooden crate, longer and wider than an American football field and taller than a 3-story building. So the architect who designed that church to look like the Titanic may have understood buttresses and load-bearing walls, but he didn't know his Bible. He wasn't alone. Millions of people around the world own a Bible, profess to read it, and follow its dictates. Many say they study it daily, but most of us have never looked at a Bible, despite insisting that it is important. According to one recent survey, 9 out of 10 Americans own a Bible, but half never read it. Why? For most folks, the Bible is hard to understand. It's confusing. It's contradictory. It's boring. In other words, the Bible perfectly fits Mark Twain's definition of a classic, a book which people praise and don't read. Not only do we praise the Bible, but we quote it daily in public and private. It permeates our language and laws. It is in our courts for administering oaths. Despite the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, it is on the Capitol steps when America inaugurates a president. It is cited by politicians and preachers, playwrights and poets, peace lovers and provocateurs. As its phenomenal sales prove, the Bible holds a special place in nearly every country in the world. There are complete Bibles in more than 40 European languages, 125 Asian and Pacific Island languages, and Bible translations into more than 100 African languages, with another 500 African language versions of some portion of the Bible. At least 15 complete Native American Bibles have been produced. In English, there are more than 3,000 versions of the entire Bible or portions of the Bible. The King James Version, first produced in 1611, and the Revised Standard Version remain the most popular translations, but publishers thrive on introducing new versions and specialty Bibles every year. The Living Bible, one contemporary paraphrased version, has sold more than 40 million copies since 1971. Around the world, active Bible study classes attract millions of students. So whether we worship in some formal setting or not, it is clear that people of nearly every nation remain fascinated by the Bible and its rich treasury of stories and lessons. To many of them, it is still the greatest story ever told. For millions of Christians, the Old and New Testaments make up the good book. For Jews, there are no Old and New Testaments, only the collection of Hebrew scriptures that are equivalent to the Christian Old Testament. In spite of these differences, the common chord for Christian and Jews is strong. These books have been the source of inspiration, healing, spiritual guidance, and ethical rules for thousands of years. The Bible is clearly many things to many people. The problem is, most of us don't know much about the Bible. Raised in a secular, media-saturated world in which references to God and religion leave us in embarrassed silence, we have wide-ranging reasons for this ignorance. For some, it was simply being bored by the drone of Sunday school or Hebrew class. Others received their Bible basics from the great but factually flawed Hollywood epics like The Ten Commandments, The Greatest Story Ever Told, and The Robe. Even those who think they know the Bible are surprised when they learn that their facts are often half-truths, misinformation, or dimly remembered stories cleaned up for synagogue and Sunday school. Sure, most people have some recollection of Noah, Abraham, and Jesus, but they are less likely to know about the tales of rape, impaling, and ethnic cleansing routinely found in the Bible. These are timeless stories with timeless themes: justice and morality, vengeance and murder, sin and redemption. Raised in a traditional Protestant church with a full menu of Christmas pageants and confirmation classes, I thought I possessed a fairly solid biblical education. While attending a Lutheran college and later Jesuit Fordham University, I continued to study the literature and history of the Bible. But then, in writing an earlier book called Don't Know Much About Geography, I posed a few simple questions related to the Bible. Where was the Garden of Eden? What is the world's oldest city? Did Moses really cross the Red Sea? That's when I got some surprises. In researching the world's oldest city, for instance, I learned that Joshua's Jericho is one of the oldest of human settlements. It also lies on a major earthquake zone. Could that simple fact of geology have had anything to do with those famous walls tumbling down? Then I discovered that Moses and the tribes of Israel never crossed the Red Sea, but escaped from Pharaoh and his chariots across the Sea of Reeds, an uncertain designation which might be one of several Egyptian lakes, or a marshy section of the Nile Delta. This mistranslation crept into the Greek version and was uncovered by modern scholars with access to old Hebrew manuscripts. To me, the fact that the Exodus, one of the key stories in the Bible, was garbled by a mistranslation was a striking revelation, and it set me to thinking, how many other glitches are there in the Bible? How many other little mistakes in translation have blurred our understanding of the real story? My questions about the Bible took a more troubling turn when I wrote Don't Know Much About the Civil War. I discovered that Christian abolitionists and defenders of slavery both turned to the Bible to support their positions. Slaveholders pointed to the existence of slavery in biblical times, as well as laws and biblical commands requiring slaves to be obedient to justify America's peculiar institution. Abolitionists cited Jewish laws for emancipating slaves and sheltering runaway slaves, New Testament verses that suggested freeing slaves, and Jesus' commandment to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. How could the Bible be right for both of them? The moral quandary pitting slavery against abolition marked a turning point in American history. For the first time, doubt was cast on the Bible's authority. My own curiosity about these troubling questions of biblical authority and accuracy come at a time when new research and scholarship are challenging many accepted notions about the Bible. For instance, there have been startling discoveries drawn from the Dead Sea Scrolls, the ancient Hebrew Bible texts, unearthed 50 years ago in some caves in the desert near the Dead Sea. These scrolls, the oldest known versions of the Hebrew scriptures that make up the Old Testament, have added immensely to an understanding of Bible texts and life at the time Jesus lived. Even more dramatic and controversial are questions raised in the Gnostic Gospels, a book that explores a cache of 1,500-year-old Christian documents very much at odds with the traditional New Testament stories of Jesus. Discoveries such as these are prompting serious scholars to re-examine very fundamental questions. Who wrote the Bible? Did Jesus say everything we were taught he said? Did he say more? Don't Know Much About the Bible is aimed at answering these questions for an audience that still considers the Bible sacred and important, but just doesn't know what it says. Of course, these sorts of questions also challenge traditional notions about what the Bible says, and I suspect my approach will roil people who are possessive about the Bible. On balance, however, this is a program in which historical accuracy, cultural context, and removing confusion about archaic words and mistranslations are all given a place in understanding these ancient texts. I try not to interpret the Bible so much as explain what is actually in it. As a historian, I know that tampering with the Bible is a risky business. I'm sure that some people will not be happy with my work because it challenges conventional wisdom by asking questions. Many people have been taught not to question the Bible. They fear that if you pull one loose thread, the whole thing will unravel like a cheap suit. Ultimately, the Bible is a book of faith, not history, biology, biography, science, or even philosophy. The questions I pose may be an affront to people who still believe that the Bible is the unquestionable Word of God. But for centuries, scholars and thinkers, many of them devout believers, have been raising legitimate doubts about the Bible. People of faith shouldn't fear these inquiries. If my questions upset you, blame Adam and Eve. After all, that forbidden fruit was plucked from the tree of knowledge, and knowledge is what this is all about. Underlying the Don't Know Much About series is the notion that school doesn't end when we leave the classroom. I believe it is crucial for people to question the easy assumptions they grow up with about religion, history, or a Ford versus a Chevy. The world is a school, life about learning. In the words of poet William Butler Yeats, education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. Beyond lighting a fire, Don't Know Much About the Bible has more ambitious goals. We live in fascinating but confounding times. Rarely has the world seemed so corrupt, yet rarely has there been such worldwide interest in religion and spirituality. Whether it is millennial curiosity or the weary rejection of modern life, many people are pondering their lives and searching for something. Call it family values, morality, virtue, perhaps even faith. For these searchers, Don't Know Much About the Bible sets out to offer some help in attaining wisdom and discipline, for understanding words of insight, for acquiring a disciplined and prudent life, doing what is right and just and fair, in the words of Proverbs. An ambitious goal? Absolutely. In other words, for the modern spiritual journeyer, this program sets out to provide a roadmap through a Bible that remains morally instructive, vividly alive, and spiritually challenging. Can I bring you faith? Can I make you believe? I'm not even going to try. If that is what you find, amen. If you don't find faith in this program, however, I hope you will at least find wisdom.
What is the Bible?
Most people think of the Bible as a book, like a long and complicated novel with too many oddly named characters and not enough plot. Pick up a Bible. Hold it in your hand. No question about it, it's a book. But it's vastly more. The word Bible comes from the medieval Latin biblia, a singular word derived from the Greek biblos, meaning books. So, in the most literal sense, the Bible is not a single book, but an anthology, a collection of many small books. In an even broader sense, it's not just an anthology of shorter works, but an entire library. You might think of a library as a physical place, but it can also mean a collection of books. And the Bible is an extraordinary gathering of many books of law, wisdom, poetry, philosophy, and history, some of them 4,000 years old. How many books this portable library contains depends on which Bible you're clutching. The Bible of a Jew is different from the Bible of a Roman Catholic, which is different from the Bible of a Protestant. Written over the course of 1,000 years, primarily in ancient Hebrew, the Jewish Bible is the equivalent of Christianity's Old Testament. For Jews, there is no New Testament. Both the Jewish Bible and Christian Old Testament contain the same books, although arranged and numbered in a slightly different order. In Jewish traditions, their Bible is also called the Tanakh, an acronym of the Hebrew words Torah, for law or teaching, Nevi'im, for the prophets, and Ketuvim, for the writings. These are the three broad divisions into which the 39 books of Hebrew Scripture are organized. These 39 books lay out the law, traditions, and history of the Jewish people and their unique relationship with their God. Starting in the beginning, with the very creation of the heavens and earth, these 39 books follow the lives of the ancient founders of the Jewish faith, the patriarchs and the matriarchs, and recount the story of the people of ancient Israel in good times and bad. While many of us recall childhood stories of such Israelite heroes as Abraham, Moses, Joshua, and David, the true centerpiece of these books is the code of divine laws, primarily laid out in the first 5 books, or Torah, that both Jews and Christians believe was given by God to the prophet Moses more than 3,000 years ago. For Christians who worship the same one God of Judaism, this Old Testament is a significant part of their religion and traditions, but it is only part of the story. Because their Bible also includes a second act, or sequel, the New Testament, which tells the story of Jesus, a man Christians believe was the Son of God. Its 27 additional books recount how Jesus' followers, most of them devout Jewish men and women, established the Christian church just about 2,000 years ago. But this quick, literal answer to the basic question of what the Bible is dodges the main issue. Some people would confidently reply that the Bible is the divinely inspired Word of God, given to humankind through God's prophets. In other words, God dictated these Bible books word for word to men in his divine stenography pool. Centuries of research into the Bible present a far more complicated picture. The Bible is the culmination of an extended process, covered with centuries of inky human fingerprints, of storytelling, writing, cutting and pasting, translating, and interpreting. That process began about 4,000 years ago and involved many writers working at different times, a fact that may still come as a distinct surprise to a good many readers.
Are the Dead Sea Scrolls the original Bible?
In the spring of 1947, while the British still controlled Palestine, Mohammed ed-Dib was tending goats in the arid rocky hills near the northern Dead Sea shore. The Dead Sea is actually a salty lake in the middle of a desert, the lowest point on the face of the earth, and one of the hottest and least inviting landscapes in the world. The fresh water flowing into it evaporates rapidly in the heat, leaving behind a thick mineral broth. Fish can't live in these waters, hence a Dead Sea. In the hills that surround the Dead Sea, the young goat herder dropped a stone into a cave, and heard it hit something. Investigating further, he came across ancient clay pots filled with scrolls and scraps of old leather covered in mysterious writing. His accidental find was the beginning of one of the most momentous and controversial discoveries in history, that of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Muhammad's find launched a wider search of the surrounding area, generally called Qumran, approximately 10 miles south of Jericho, on a plateau overlooking the Dead Sea. After the initial discovery sent amateurs crawling all over these rocky hills, scurrying to find more scrolls, an orderly archaeological search of Qumran was eventually organized. Over the years, many more scrolls and remnants of scrolls were uncovered. 50 years after that first find, researchers are still trying to piece together all of the tiny bits and pieces of leather fragments preserved by the dry desert air. What is clear is that these ancient scrolls included some of the oldest known texts of the Hebrew Bible ever found. Written in both Hebrew and Aramaic, a Syrian language closely related to Hebrew, and the language spoken by Jesus, more than 200 biblical documents have been found. Some are almost complete, others are in fragments. The scrolls contain at least a portion of every book of the Hebrew Bible, except the book of Esther. Sophisticated dating techniques have proven that some of these scrolls were written nearly 300 years before Jesus was born. Others came from Jesus' own lifetime, a turbulent period in ancient Palestine when Rome controlled a contentious, rebellious Jewish people. The Dead Sea Scrolls make two facts clear. By the time Jesus was born, an official list, or canon, of Hebrew books in the Bible had not yet been set. And while these old books are very similar to the Hebrew Scriptures as they are known today, there were slightly different versions of some of these ancient Hebrew texts. While the scrolls from Qumran offer fascinating information about the Hebrew text of the Bible and life in first-century Palestine, they leave another big, tantalizing question unresolved.
Who wrote the Hebrew Bible of Old Testament?
Many readers of the Bible still possess the divine light bulb notion of the Bible's composition. In this scenario, a man was sitting in his tent in the Sinai desert when suddenly, in a glorious flash, the entire text of the Scriptures started flowing onto parchment or papyrus. As the Gershwins put it so succinctly, it ain't necessarily so. The history of the Holy Scriptures that modern Jews and Christians study is a fantastic story in itself, a tale out of an Indiana Jones movie. It's still unfolding with each new archaeological dig and discovery of an ancient scroll. Yet while the depth of our knowledge grows, the answer to a basic and extraordinary question largely remains a mystery. Who wrote the Bible? In spite of tremendous strides in scholarship and research dedicated to this question, the fact remains, no one really knows. And we will probably never know, short of some archaeological find of earth-shaking significance. But it is safe to say that the King James Version, familiar to most English-speaking Christians, and all the other versions loading down the bookstore shelves, are only recent links near the end of a long chain of troubled, sometimes badly garbled, and often conflicting translations. These various translations over the centuries have shaped perceptions of the Bible and what people believe it says. It still comes as a surprise to some English speakers that the Bible was not written in English, or to German speakers that it was not written in German. But research into ancient manuscripts, such as the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the discovery of other ancient libraries have provided many more clues about the people who did write the Bible. First, researchers have learned that some of what appears in the most ancient sections of the Bible, including some of the stories in Genesis, was probably borrowed from other more ancient civilizations, particularly those of Egypt and Babylon. Various aspects of the laws that God gives to Moses in Exodus are similar to Babylonian laws known as the Code of Hammurabi, which is a few centuries older than the Bible. The story of the infant Moses set afloat in a basket is similar to the Mesopotamian legend of an ancient king named Sargon. In other words, the authors of the Bible, like writers before and since, were not above liberal borrowing, or what modern writers call fair use. The beginning of the actual process of writing down what Jews call the Tanakh and what Christians call the Old Testament dates back more than 3,000 years to approximately 1000 BCE. BCE, or before the Common Era, replaces BC, before Christ, in the dating system scholars now prefer. The actual process of writing down the scriptures followed an oral tradition that goes back at least another 1,000 years. The oldest of the Hebrew scriptures are the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. In Jewish tradition, these 5 are called the Torah, which means law or teaching. They are also known as both the 5 books of Moses and, in Greek, the Pentateuch, or 5 scrolls.
Didn't Moses write the Torah?
For centuries, Moses was accepted as the author of the 5 books of Torah. The Torah stated that Moses wrote down what he was told, so this was not simply a scholar's opinion, but an unquestioned matter of faith for both Jews and Christians. Some editions of the Bible still assert that Moses was the author of Genesis, and there are earnest believers who hold that as an article of faith. In the past, daring to question that fact took guts and more than a little chutzpah. When an 11th century scholar pointed out that a list of kings mentioned in the Torah lived long after Moses died, he was called Isaac the Blunderer, and his books were burned. Better his books burned than himself, Isaac undoubtedly mused. By the 17th century, as Europe entered the era of the Enlightenment, when rational thought and scientific observations were elevated over blind faith, other scholars began to question the authorship of Moses. A French priest who raised questions about Moses was arrested and forced to recant his views. In the grand tradition of the Roman Catholic Church, his writing was banned and burned. The official church resisted these questions about Moses for the same reason it always does. To ask questions raises doubts. But their power rested on unquestioning belief. Let some troublemakers start asking about Moses, and before you know it, they'll be asking why women can't be priests. What these generations of scholars all noted was that the books of Moses, in which the laws of God had been laid out, contained contradictions in time, place, and names that couldn't possibly belong in the time of Moses. Why were there duplicate versions of so many Bible stories? Versions that did not always agree. Why, for instance, does Genesis open with 2 different versions of the creation? Even more troubling, there were different names for God. If God had dictated these scriptures to Moses, why hadn't God used the same name all the time? And finally, how could Moses write, at the end of Deuteronomy, "Then Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab at the Lord's command"? These and other troubling questions raised by the mystery of Moses just wouldn't go away. And as the Enlightenment and Protestant Reformation chipped away at the pervasive power of the Church of Rome, the questions were asked by more and more people. No longer could church leaders explain away the numerous differences in style or the contradictions and anachronisms contained in the Torah as the Word of God, take it or leave it. As generations of scholars pursued this mystery, it became clearer that Moses was not the book's author. They might be the books of Moses, but they were not the books by Moses. Equally important was the mounting evidence that the books attributed to Moses were composed at very different historical times. To many serious scholars, it seemed apparent that more than one author was at work. On many of these points, honest people still disagree. The difference is no one is being burned for heresy any longer.
If not Moses, then who?
Most scholars now agree that there were at least 4 or 5 main authors, or groups of authors, of the Hebrew Scriptures. They believe that they were composed over a long time, stretching from sometime around 1000 to 400 BCE. The idea that the Torah evolved from a combination of various sources is formally known as the documentary hypothesis. This thinking gained such weight that by 1943, even the Vatican, under Pope Pius XII, acknowledged it was time to solve these questions. Today, the idea is widely accepted and taught by leading religious schools, including the divinity schools at Harvard and Yale, the Union Theological Seminary, and both the Jewish Theological Seminary and the Hebrew Union College. The precise identity of who wrote these books is an unsolved and most likely an unsolvable mystery, barring an archaeological find of the most revolutionary sort. But the principal authors have been given names and are identified by 5 letters of the alphabet: J, E, D, P, and R. J is the oldest and perhaps most celebrated of these presumed authors. J is from the first letter of the German word Yahweh, the source of the word Jehovah, another mistranslation now written in English as Yahweh. The biblical writer codenamed J consistently calls the Israelite God Yahweh. J is the Hebrew Bible's best storyteller, more interesting, more humorous, and more human than the others. J's Yahweh interacts with man easily and directly. Close on J's heels is E, the Elohist, so called because this author preferred to use the word Elohim for God. Although some scholars have placed E before or even contemporary with J, most think E came later, perhaps between 850 and 800 BCE. Most agree also that E is a much less colorful writer than J, and that E's contribution begins with the story of Abraham in Genesis. The third Old Testament author is known as the Deuteronomist, who most likely worked between 700 and 600 BCE and was responsible for large portions of the book of Deuteronomy. D is also thought to have shaped the major historical works of Hebrew Scripture that describe the conquest of Canaan and the establishment of the Kingdom of Israel. The texts credited to P, known as the priestly author, include some of the most familiar words in Western civilization, including in the beginning, the creation account found in Genesis 1, and the first version of the Ten Commandments. P's contribution was probably written sometime between 550 and 500 BCE. Dry and detail-obsessed, P was especially interested in codifying and justifying all of the ritual laws developed by the early Jewish priesthood. P might as well have been called L, because he is so concerned with the law, but he is also often as long-winded and tedious as a lawyer. In addition to these 4 writers, or groups of writers, there was probably another individual or group responsible for creating the Pentateuch, and some of the other early books. R was the redactor, or editor, who took the 4 existing strands and spliced them together, probably around 400 BCE. Like the others, R's identity is a mystery. No one even knows whether there was more than one redactor. The work of the redactor is fascinating because of the way so many different and even contradictory strands of Scripture were woven together. But it also raises a beguiling question. Were there any parts that are edited out of the picture? That is a mystery that remains in the realm of speculation. As for the other 34 books of the Hebrew Bible, the prophets and the writings, evidence of authorship is either shaky or a complete mystery. Many of the books show the handiwork of writers working at different times and in different historical circumstances. But it is safe to say that David didn't write all, or even most, of
don't know much about the Bible. Very interesting, theological, very precise history. Okay, the time is 12 o'clock. Yes, this is the Cutting Edge on RFM. Back to where we are dealing now.
The Psalms of David. Solomon didn't write Proverbs or the Song of Solomon. And Isaiah didn't write Isaiah. These books, again transmitted orally for generations, were not finally set down in something like their present form until about 400 BCE, long after Moses and David. Some were not considered Holy Scripture for many more years. It was only around 90 CE that the Jewish rabbis closed the book on what they considered the official list of their Bible. CE CE, or Common Era, is the historical dating system. D, or Anno Domini.
Who were the children of Israel?
Why is there no evidence outside the Bible that such crucial personalities as Abraham or Moses existed? Why didn't the Israelites think to make sure that they kept track of which precise mountain was Mount Sinai of the Ten Commandments? These are bothersome questions for any thinking reader of the Bible. But they point to another underlying issue. Most of us have no sense of the historical background of the Israelites and little idea as to who the people of the Hebrew Bible actually were. This brings us to a basic fact. It is nearly impossible to understand the writing and meaning of the Bible without understanding the history of the people who wrote it, the ancient Israelites. Who were these people? The first Jews. Located on the eastern coast of the Mediterranean area, but it was a natural bridge between three continents, Africa, Asia, and Europe, as well as a natural beachhead for seafaring traders from the Mediterranean. And it was this geography that made the area such a collecting point for so many different groups who have had so much impact on history. Though small in area, this land the Bible called Canaan features an extraordinary diversity of climate and features. A gentle coastline slopes up to mountains and the vast deserts beyond. The Jordan River flows from the steep, snow-tipped mountains of Jordan into a beautiful freshwater lake, the Sea of Galilee, before plunging down to the Dead Sea. Into this land of such striking contrasts came waves of people, some as wanderers, some as traders, but many as invaders and conquerors. This was a blood-soaked piece of real estate, just as it continued. Bracketing the land of Canaan were the two great superpowers of the ancient world. To the north and east was the land of Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization that sprung up in the fertile plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. At the extreme other end of the land was Egypt, home of a civilization that lasted for thousands of years. Wedged into a tiny strip of land between the sea and desert, Canaan served as bridge, buffer, and battleground between these two great ancient lands, whose emperors vied for control of the area for centuries. The land called Canaan in the Bible gradually grew to include both rural and urban people. A true melting pot, it was a land of herders, farmers, and traders. It was also a land of many gods and religions, although one group of Canaanite gods was most widely worshipped. The supreme El, a word that figures prominently in Genesis, as evidenced in such names as Israel and Bethel. El's son was the storm god Baal, another name that appears prominently throughout ancient Israel's violent history. And among Baal's consorts were Astarte and Asherah, mythical female goddesses who must have been very alluring to the children of Israel. The followers of Moses and their descendants kept getting into trouble with their Yahweh God because they continued to worship these fertility goddesses instead of Yahweh. Since worshiping Baal and his goddesses probably meant having sex, or watching priests have sex, it was presumably more appealing to the masses than a religion that involved killing small animals and didn't allow women in the temple. This oversexed Canaan was the little piece of land that the Israelites said they had been promised by their God. Or archaeological evidence to tell much about the people who came to be called Hebrews, a word possibly derived from an Egyptian word, Habiru, a derogatory term for outsiders, or Jews, derived from the later Roman name for the country, Judea. No one really knows when the children of Israel arrived in Canaan. No one really knows precisely where they came from, although the evidence points to beginnings in the Tigris-Euphrates area. At some point, they moved into Canaan, and sometime after 2000 BCE, some of them crossed into Egypt and remained there in the Nile Delta for a few hundred years. This group left Egypt, where they said they had been enslaved by an unnamed pharaoh, and moved into the wastelands of either the Sinai or Arabian desert for 40 years under the direction of a charismatic leader named Moses, who said he spoke to God. That these people would one day possess Canaan were reconfirmed. By around 1200 BCE, through conquest or gradual migration, the Bible has it both ways, they eventually took control of the land from the Canaanites, whose religious and sexual practices were so abhorrent to them. It's difficult to say precisely what these Canaanites did that was so abominable, but it can be assumed they had sex in their temples and possibly didn't flinch at homosexuality, incest, bestiality, or human sacrifice. The first piece of historical evidence of the existence of the children of Israel is a stone plaque, or stela, from Egypt, dated 1235 BCE. This stela, from the reign of Pharaoh Merneptah, mentions the complete destruction of the people of Israel. Merneptah's claim of a lopsided military victory, obviously inflated, is the first recorded reference to.
If the scriptures were written in Hebrew, where did all the Greek words come from?
Approximately 2,000 years of history pass within the Bible's pages. Great empires came and went around the ancient Near East. Along with those rising and falling empires and cultures, Hebrew and Aramaic fell into disuse, eventually replaced by Greek. And sometime around 250 BCE, when many Jews realized that they no longer understood the Hebrew of their ancient religion, someone decided to preserve those writings in a complete Greek translation of Hebrew scripture. This Greek translation was later called the Septuagint, meaning 70. According to the legend, 72 elders, 6 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, did the translating. Each of these elders produced exactly the same translation in exactly 72 days. To 70. Modern scholars dismiss the 72 identical translations as legend. In fact, the work was begun because the large Jewish community in Egypt and elsewhere in the Hellenized or Greek-speaking world needed a translation from Hebrew, which had fallen out of use during the diaspora or dispersion of Jews throughout the Mediterranean world. The Greek Septuagint became the most popular form of the Hebrew Bible. It was the unofficial scripture of the early Christians who read the Hebrew laws and prophets in Greek. Roman Catholic Bibles, such as the Jerusalem Bible, still show this influence. Some of the books in the Septuagint were not considered holy by the Jewish rabbis, who established the official canon of their Bible. When the Christian church split during the Protestant Reformation, the Protestants accepted the Jewish canon. That's why the Protestant Old Testament is the same as the numbering of some books. However, Roman Catholics consider the Septuagint holy, and Roman Catholic Bibles include 11 books that are not in the Hebrew or Protestant Old Testament. These books, called the Deuterocanonical books, are represented in modern Bibles in the Apocrypha. Apocrypha, not to be confused with Apocalypse, is from Greek by way of Latin and means hidden. To further confuse this issue, other Christian sects, such as the Eastern Orthodox churches, recognize even more books as sacred. In other words, for nearly 2,000 years, humans have been deciding what should and shouldn't be read as the divine word of God. All of them claim to be inspired by God in making those judgments, but all don't agree. The next major step in the process that led to the Bible as it is known today came when Latin, the language of the Roman Empire, common language. Beginning in 382 CE, a priest named Jerome began the process of bringing both Hebrew scriptures and the New Testament into Latin. Working for 20 years in Bethlehem, the traditional birthplace of Jesus, Jerome went back to the original Hebrew and Aramaic texts, instead of simply translating the Septuagint Greek into Latin. Jerome supervised the translation of a Latin Bible that was completed by 405 CE. His work resulted in the Versio Vulgata, or Common Translation, better known as the Vulgate Bible. To Jerome, Vulgata meant vulgar in the sense of commonly used, rather than the widespread modern meaning of vulgar as dirty. But this is a perfect example of how words change meaning, a significant factor in understanding the Bible. Many words simply do not mean in 1,500 years ago. Among Jerome's decisions was to retain the use of the name Jesus, which was how the first century Greek writers of the New Testament had translated the Hebrew name Joshua. Of course, only priests and a few wealthy, educated individuals could read the Word of God. During this era, the scriptures were still copied by hand in the famed illuminated manuscripts of the so-called Dark Ages. Of course, few people could afford to own such a book, and few ever saw one. Fewer still could read it. The Latin Mass became the predominant form of worship in Europe, but most people had no idea what was being said in church. The advent of Gutenberg's printing press in 1450 meant the Bible could be mechanically produced, but even then, only about 200 copies of the Gutenberg Bible were produced, and it was still. In the early years of the movement that came to be called the Protestant Reformation, begun in Germany in 1517 by Martin Luther, a few daring souls attempted to translate Holy Scripture from the Hebrew, Greek, and Latin into commonly used German and English. Like the mythical Prometheus, punished for bringing fire to mankind, some of these rebels would pay for their crimes. Some died for their belief that the Bible was for all the people to read. Every stand-up comedian, speaker, or preacher knows that the best way to get an audience's attention is to tell a good story. If the story is funny, that's even better. A little sin and sex? Better still. That's why writers from Homer, Aesop, and the other Greeks, right through Shakespeare and up to modern Hollywood, have always dressed up their messages with great stories. It's full of great stories. And not just the simplistic virtue tales many of us remember from Sunday school. The Hebrew prophets often cloaked their messages in stories. And Jesus certainly relied upon parables and short stories to teach. But nowhere is the truth of the Bible being a great story more evident than in its opening book. Here is an entire account of the beginning of human civilization and God's unique relationship with humanity, reduced to a series of fascinating narratives. This mini-series is filled with all the cliffhanging action and humor that we expect from television or the movies. The stories are poignant, funny, compelling, and not a little troubling. On one hand, there is faith, goodness in the face of evil, and obedience to God. But on the other hand, there is betrayal, trickery, thieving, incest, and murder. Moralizing Sunday school tales of a bunch of goody-goodies who are well-behaved and did exactly what God told them to do, and what God told them to do wasn't always so nice in the first place.
REFM, thought-provoking, always smoking. Lyrics like a bazooka. You are listening to Muta Baruka.
The Torah by the opening words, or first significant word in the book, call it Bereshit, in the beginning. Readers who return to Genesis after an absence may be surprised to discover that it is a much different story from the one they may dimly recall from childhood. Genesis covers time from the beginning of the world through early human history and the rise of civilization to the establishment of God's special relationship with the patriarchs, matriarchs, and people of Israel. Abraham and Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, and their twin sons, Esau and Jacob, and Jacob's wives and family, the chief member of which was Joseph. It ends with the death of Joseph and the Israelite sojourn in Egypt, setting the stage for Exodus.
Why are there two creations in Genesis?
One of the most sudden and shocking surprises to readers who might be vaguely familiar with the biblical creation story but have never read the Bible is that there are actually two creations in Genesis, separate and unequal. Version 1 begins comfortably with the well-known, "In the beginning." Out of nothingness, and simply by speaking, God creates an orderly world and humanity. In this first creation, which begins in the first chapter of Genesis, it takes God 6 days to create the heavens and earth. Then come the animals, are created simultaneously, as apparent equals in God's image. After a hard week at the office, God decides to put his feet up and take a day off, instituting the first Sabbath. The second version of creation is set in the Garden of Eden. It makes no mention of the number of days God took to accomplish this heavy lifting, and the order of creation is different from the first account. In the second version, man is created before the trees and other animals. The other big difference in this second creation is that man is created first, and then woman is created out of man. Side by side, these are clearly two different stories featuring substantially different details. This is where the J versus P version of biblical events discussed earlier first comes into focus. The first of the creation stories is attributed to P, the priestly writer. Out of nothingness, a void. On 6 successive days, P describes the Creator neatly making the universe, setting up shop on earth, and finally getting around to making people. In the words of the King James Version, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them." Clearly, in the first creation account, there is no differentiating between male and female. God creates both sexes at the same time, both in his image. Of course, this first creation account raises all sorts of troubling questions on its own, even without a competing version in the next chapter. Who is this us that God mentions when he says, "Let us make man in our image"? So far, the creation hasn't included anyone else. Is it the regal us? And if mankind is created God, and would that image be black or white, European, Chinese, or Eskimo? If man and woman are created together, both can't literally be made in God's image, can they? And if God says this creation is good, why does it go so bad? Of course, questions like these have puzzled philosophers and religious thinkers for centuries, filling libraries with discourses on the nature of God and creation. Certainly, those problems are vexing enough. But Genesis complicates matters as the creation story is retold with significant changes. In this version, attributed to J, God creates earth and the heavens and then makes Adam from the dust of the ground. He sets Adam down in Eden, where there are trees that are pleasing to the sight and good for food, as well as the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. After that, God, seeing that Adam is still lonely, God makes woman out of one of Adam's ribs. In this account, there is no mention of how many days this took and when, or if, God rested. These stories were not entirely original. Both the first creation account, in which God speaks and the world is made, and the second creation account, starring Adam and Eve, share similarities to other creation myths of the ancient Near East. The myths of Mesopotamia and Egypt, the two great civilizations that bracketed the land of the Israelites, also celebrated the concept of a divine word. In other words, the ancient Israelites drew upon commonly held beliefs about the creation, ancient folklore that came from the lands and people that had the most impact on the ancient Near East. That basic fact will be repeated often throughout Genesis. The difference was that in Genesis, it was between the Israelite God and humanity that had no precedent. The ancient nature gods, whose behavior was more human than divine, were transformed by the Israelites into a personal God with a very clear and rigid moral code. This God was going to make these people his favorites, but they had to toe a very sharp line of good behavior, or else. Much of the Hebrew Scriptures will tell the story of what happens when the children of Israel don't keep up their end of the promise.
Who was right, Genesis or Darwin?
How do you balance a belief that the world was created by divine pronouncement a mere 6,000 years ago with scientific observations that modern humans walked 117,000 years ago and a galaxy was born 13 billion years ago? This is the war between science and faith. Room argument or a nice academic debate over sherry in an ivory tower. The question of science versus faith has spilled into classrooms and courtrooms over such major controversies as cloning, Christian Science, and creationism. Until Charles Darwin rolled into town in 1859 with his notion of natural selection, most people accepted that God made the world in 6 days and then he rested. For nearly 4,000 years, many people accepted Genesis as a perfectly viable account of the world's beginnings. Then science turned into the skunk at the garden party. When Copernicus, Kepler, and Galileo suggested that the Earth revolved around the sun, they were mocked, or worse. In 1616, Galileo was accused of heresy, placed under house arrest, and prohibited from further scientific inquiry. Then Darwin, man had evolved slowly, sharing common ancestry with the apes. Most of the religious world did not take kindly to this suggestion. It was one thing to discover that Galileo had been right about the solar system. It was another to accept that humankind was kissing cousin to the monkey. The challenge remains, more than a century after Darwin first proposed the ideas that formed the basis for modern evolutionary theory. Can science and religion coexist? Nowhere is that battle more clearly defined than in the question over the divine creation. As many creationists like to point out, evolution is just a theory. And that's true. In a purely scientific sense, all theories can only be disproven. But theories can also be supported by evidence. And the past 100 years have provided ample evidence to support and expand the scientific view, not only of human origins. Putting Genesis in a biology or genetics class, however, makes about as much sense as teaching the changing of water into wine, Jesus' first miracle, in a chemistry class. But that does not mean that scientific and religious theory cannot somehow be brought together. As science explores further and further past the known world, whether it means seeing 13 billion years into the universe's past, or using DNA strains to push humankind's origins back another million years, science is ultimately left with more questions. The notion that the universe is all energy has forced scientists who deal in the astonishing world of quantum physics to look past their equations to a universal creative force. At the same time, to accept that the Bible is filled with poetry, allegory, teaching parables, and other stories doesn't alter the fundamental truth. As Pope John Paul II said when he gave support to Darwinian evolution, if the human body has its origin in living material which pre-exists it, the spiritual soul is immediately created by God. Of course, science can't speak of the creation or even existence of the soul. The soul can't be removed, weighed, and dissected as human organs can. Why not see the creation in Genesis as a magnificent metaphor for the Big Bang, an event that science acknowledges but does not yet fully understand? Viewing the opening words of Genesis as a poetic account of this cosmic instant of creation, when matter essentially burst out of energy, doesn't alter the essential truth of Genesis for those who believe it. Having made man out of the dust and brought him into existence with the breath of life, God places man to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, threatening death if he does. Then God creates the rest of the animals to keep him company. The man names these animals, but still doesn't have a proper partner. God then causes the man to sleep and removes one of his ribs and forms woman. The man and woman are naked in the garden, unashamedly enjoying sex. Along comes the serpent, and the woman is convinced to eat from the forbidden tree. The serpent promises her that she will be like God, or gods, depending on the translation. The woman agrees, then gives the fruit to the man, and he eats. Their eyes now open to their nakedness. They feel shame, and sew fig leaves into loincloths, and try to hide from God. Out for a stroll, God finds them hiding, and asks who told them they were naked. The man quickly establishes the human tradition of finger-pointing by saying, "Be with me. She gave me fruit from the tree, and I ate." God is not happy. It is the first of several biblical moments in which he will wonder if this man thing was such a good idea after all. But instead of starting from scratch, God gets mad, then he gets even. The serpent is cursed to crawl in his belly, and there will be permanent hostility between snakes and people. The woman will suffer the pain of childbirth and be ruled by her husband. We know a man wrote that. Instead of invoking the death sentence promised earlier, God curses the man to a life of hard work. Then the first couple gets kicked out of the garden.
Were there really apples in Eden?
Apples are supposed to be good for you. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. And what's more wholesome in America than apple pie? So how come apples got such a bad name in Genesis? There was no apple in Eden. Genesis doesn't even mention forbidden fruit. The Eden account mentions only the fruit of knowledge and the fruit of everlasting life. Some historians have suggested a number of likely suspects as the forbidden fruit, including apricots, pomegranates, or figs. A prime candidate since the leaves of the fig tree became the first unisex leisure wear. Fig trees also figure prominently in other spiritual tales, particularly that of the Buddha, who achieved enlightenment while sitting beneath a fig tree known as the Tree of Wisdom. This suggests that the fig may be more than just filling for Fig Newtons. In other words, the image of Eve polishing up a nice red apple, fodder for great artists and political cartoonists throughout history, has no biblical basis. The apple wasn't connected to the Eden story until the European Middle Ages. Eve with an apple, presumably as a way to give common people a familiar fruit. In eating from the tree, Adam and Eve acquire the capacity for rational and ethical judgments, one of the key ingredients in setting human beings apart from the rest of the animal world. If the first couple had obeyed God, it would have meant that humanity would have lived in a paradise without wants, worry, or presumably violence. But what a boring paradise that might have been. A vegetarian paradise with no wants is like a life of eternal infancy, a paradise without science, art, and the sort of rational distinctions that have brought humanity to its present state. The biblical tale of the fall is similar to other legends that contrast humanity's sufferings with an earlier time of perfection, a lost paradise or golden age. The Greeks' Pandora, like Eve, is responsible because she disobeyed the order not to open the box out of which all the troubles of the world flew. Like all such myths of a lost golden age, the biblical fall is an attempt to account for the problems of evil and human suffering, and a symbol of how humans have always yearned for a better, but possibly unattainable world. Adam and Eve have two sons, Cain and Abel. Cain, the firstborn, was a farmer. Abel was the first shepherd. Both bring offerings to God, but God rejects Cain's offering of grain without explanation, preferring Abel's, which was the firstborn of his flock. Angry that God rejects his offering, Cain decides to take it out on Abel and kills his brother. God discovers this act when he asks Cain where Abel is, and the famous, "Am I my brother's keeper?" reply is given. Curses Cain by making him a wanderer, the original fugitive, and marks him with an unspecified sign. This so-called mark of Cain is actually a protective sign from God that will prevent anyone from murdering Nod, east of Eden. It is not precisely clear why God gives the murderer this mark of divine protection. Perhaps God wants to reserve judgment on Cain for himself. After Cain leaves, Adam and Eve give birth to a third son, Seth.
Where did Cain's wife come from?
So we have Adam, Eve, and their sons, Cain and Abel. The story of Cain and Abel introduces many of the themes that will recur throughout Genesis and the Hebrew Scriptures. Of course, it marks the first murder. But there is also the first appearance of sibling rivalry, and the enmity between brothers will be replayed throughout Genesis. The two characters also symbolically represent the farmer, Cain, and the nomadic herder, Abel. Tension between these groups was common throughout ancient times, so the story stands as a mythic two ancient callings, the true oldest professions. Cain goes off to the land of Nod, which means wandering, and finds an unnamed wife. Where did she come from? The scriptures contain no explanation for Cain's wife or the people Cain fears might murder him. One simplistic rationale, unsupported by the text, is that God kept creating more people after Adam and Eve. Another is that Adam and Eve had more children, and they were all able to intermarry, as incest was not yet deemed out of bounds. This inconsistency is only one of many blows to the literal interpretation of the Bible. This is the chief argument for viewing the Genesis account as a mythical folktale tracing the primeval beginnings of humanity, steeped in the ancient folklore of the Near East. Once married, Cain begins a family, and his firstborn son is named Enoch. This is a typical Genesis combination of place and personal names. The notion that Cain builds a city also contradicts the curse that Cain would always be a wanderer. He was actually the founder of the first city. Maybe God issued a parole. Genesis doesn't say. At this point in the narrative, two separate genealogies trace the descendants of Cain and his younger brother Seth, born after Abel's death. The Seth list, the more important of the two in that it leads to Noah, also contains specific and fantastic ages for each ancestor. The Lord saw that the wickedness of humankind was great in the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made mankind on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out from the earth the people together with animals and creeping things and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the sight of the Lord. Genesis chapter 6, verses 5 through 8. People have become very wicked, so God decides to clean the slate by sending a flood. Only Noah and his family, direct descendants of Adam, are good enough to save. So God orders Noah to build a boat, or an ark, from the Hebrew word for box, or chest. Noah is told only to take his wife, their 3 sons, and their wives aboard, along with pairs of all animals and birds. This is where the ark story gets a little confused, and it's clear that someone mingled the separate J and P accounts of the flood into a single narrative that is sometimes contradictory. One account calls for pairs of every animal on the earth, clean and unclean animals, and 7 pairs of each species of birds. The flood comes not just from the rains, but up from below the earth in a kind of reverse creation. Water covers the earth, killing everyone and everything, the innocent with the guilty. It rains for 40 days and 40 nights, but the account also says the water covered the earth for 150 days. When the water recedes, the ark comes to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Then Noah sends out a series of birds. The first, a raven, doesn't return. The second, a dove, returns, as there is nowhere to land. The dove is released again, and this time returns with an olive branch, indicating that the waters have begun to recede. The dove is sent out once more and does not return. Finally, God simply to be fruitful and multiply on the earth. Noah and the missus and the kids then set out to repopulate the world. Noah takes time to make a burnt offering of the animals and birds he has just saved from destruction. Pleased by Noah's thought, God says, "I will never again curse the ground because of humankind, for the inclination of the human heart is evil from youth. Nor will I ever again destroy every living creature as I have done." As a sign of this covenant, or promise, God sets a bow in the sky, presumably a folkloric explanation for rainbows after a rain. As a part of this new covenant or agreement, God blesses Noah, gives him a new set of dietary laws. Meat is now in, the vegetarianism specified earlier in Genesis is out, and institutes a new sanctuary. Serves as a symbolic second creation tale. God realizes his flaws and starts over. It is not exactly a comforting picture of God. This God of the flood seems rather impatient, unforgiving, and testy. Apart from Noah, who is described as righteous, and his family, there is apparently no one else in all of creation worth saving. The innocent, including the animals of the world, are caught up with the guilty.
Was Noah the first drunk?
Things are not perfect in the new creation after Noah and the kids settle down, especially when the fruit of the vine makes its first biblical appearance. Noah becomes the first man to plant a vineyard, invents wine, and then discovers getting drunk. While Noah is lying in his tent, naked and drunk, his son Ham accidentally walks in and sees Dad in this state. He tells his what he saw, and they discreetly cover their father without looking at him. When Noah discovers that Ham has seen him in his birthday suit, he isn't too happy. Without explaining why this is such a bad thing, Noah curses his son. But there is some confusion here because Noah places the curse on Canaan, Ham's son, rather than on the actual culprit, Ham. He says, "Cursed be Canaan, lowest of slaves shall he be to his brothers." He also says, "Blessed by the Lord my God be Shem, and let Canaan be his slave." This confusion had long-lasting and ghastly implications. The point of this story would have been quite clear for the ancient Israelites. They were meant to rule over Canaan's descendants, the people who lived in the Promised Land. The Canaanites had a reputation for fairly lascivious sexual practices that were highly offensive in the eyes of the Israelites. Seeing one's father naked, a homosexual act by Ham has been suggested, was associated with the lewd Canaanite sexual practices. In Leviticus, the phrase, "to uncover nakedness," is a euphemism for sexual relations. But the real historical impact of this passage was the later interpretation widely given to this story in 17th and 18th century America. Looking for moral justification for slavery, American slaveholders argued, incorrectly, that Ham was the ancestor of the so-called southern tribes that included Africa. As the children of Ham, Africans were therefore meant to be slaves, a point of view that can only be charitably called way off base. Still, it was a widely accepted interpretation in England and America until well into the 1800s, when some Christian groups began to condemn slavery as a grave sin. Numerous other biblical verses were also cited. Overlooked were some of the other Israelite laws regarding slavery, including invocations to free runaway slaves. The other two sons of Noah received great blessings, and the line beginning with Noah's son Shem eventually leads to the patriarch Abraham. The name Shem is the source of the word Semite, which applies to all the groups who were descended from Shem, Jew and Arab alike. Born in a direct line from Noah, Abram, the son of Terah, was also directly descended from Adam. The founding patriarch of Jews and Arabs alike, Abram, whose name will later be changed by God to Abraham, had a brother named Haran. Haran died, but had a son named Lot, who was Abram's nephew. Abram's wife was Sarai, who was also his half-sister. Terah took his son Abram, Sarai. A little confusion here, because the place name is the same name of Abram's dead brother. Haran is the name of a city in Mesopotamia, in what is now modern Syria. While in Haran, Abram is instructed by God to go to nearby Canaan, a land that God promises to Abram and his descendants. In Canaan, Abram sets up 2 altars and invokes the name of the Lord. When a famine strikes, Abram goes to Egypt, where he is afraid that the Pharaoh will kill him in order to take his wife, Sarai, because she is so beautiful. To save his own life, Abram tells Sarai to pretend she is his sister. Sarai is taken into the Pharaoh's household as a concubine, and Abram prospers. But God sends a plague on the Pharaoh's house, and when the Pharaoh discovers Abram's deceit, he orders Abram to leave Egypt. Once back in Canaan, Abram and Lot decide offers Lot the first choice of land, and Abram's nephew picks out a plain near the city of Sodom. Abram goes to the hill country of Canaan, where he is once more told by God, "I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring also can be counted." Promised repeatedly that he will found a great nation, Abram is getting worried, and not any younger. When he considers making one of his household slaves his heir, his wife Sarai suggests he take her Egyptian slave, Hagar, as a concubine. Any child she bore would still be considered Sarai's. Clay tablets found in the Near East confirm that this would have been a completely acceptable idea in that time. But the story takes on a wonderful human quality when the barren Sarai becomes jealous of the pregnant Hagar and mistreats her to the wilderness, where God promises that her unborn child will also have many offspring. And she returns to Abram to bear his first son, Ishmael, which means God hears. Arabs trace their origin to the Ishmaelites, the Bedouin tribes of the southern wilderness. This is the ancient connection between Arab and Jew through Abraham. But God promises yet another son to the incredulous Abram, now 99 years old, and Sarai, who is 90. God tells Abram that he will now be called Abraham, which means ancestor of a multitude. God promises him all the land of Canaan, and asks him to keep the deal by circumcising every male in his tribe. Abraham agrees, and all the adult males, including 13-year-old Ishmael, are circumcised. The ritualistic removal of the male foreskin is not peculiar. It was practiced by many African, South American, and Middle Eastern people, including the Egyptians. Sarai laughs at the seemingly ridiculous notion that she will bear a son at her age. God also changes her name to Sarah. Later, Sarah gives birth to Isaac, a name that means he laughs. Isaac will become Abraham's heir. Hagar is once more forced to flee because of Sarah's jealousy, and again the promise is made that Ishmael will found a nation. Left in the wilderness without water, Hagar begs not to see her son die. An angel, an English word derived from the Greek word for messenger, appears to Hagar, and a well miraculously begins to flow. In that biblical hotspot, Sodom, where Abraham's nephew Lot has chosen to settle, once again God looks down and doesn't like the scene. Evil is everywhere, especially in the form of unspecified sexual depravity, which is why certain sexual crimes are still gathered together under the catch-all term sodomy. Once again, God decides to do away with at least some of his most troublesome creations. Remember, God promised Noah that he would never again destroy everyone. But before God wipes anybody out, Abraham strikes a bargain with the Lord. persuasively arguing that God should not destroy the innocent with the guilty. Abraham haggles with God, negotiating down from 50 righteous men to 45, then 40, then 30, then 20. God finally agrees that for the sake of 10 righteous men, the town won't be destroyed. Apparently, 10 aren't to be found. 2 angels in human form, sent to warn Abraham of doom, are welcomed into Lot's home, fed, and offered beds for the night in the best tradition of ancient hospitality. But a lusty and unruly crowd of Sodom's men demands that Lot turn over these strangers so that they might know them. Clearly, the crowd is not the welcome wagon. Faced with turning his guests over to a certain homosexual gang rape, Lot refuses, even going so far as to offer his 2 virgin daughters to the frenzied mob. He views his obligation as host as greater than his role as father. The crowd angrily presses in on him, and Lot is pulled back into his house. The angels tell Lot to take his family away. Sodom is about to be leveled. Lot's future sons-in-law don't believe them and refuse to leave. Even Lot is slow to take the hint, so the angels lead him, his wife, and their 2 daughters out of the city. Sodom and evils are curiously never spelled out, are destroyed. On the way out of town, Lot's wife ignores the warning not to look back. As fire and brimstone rain down on the wicked twin cities, she is turned into a pillar of salt. The account of Lot's wife is another version of a common mythic theme. Someone is punished for looking back against divine or heavenly instructions. In the Greek myths, for instance, Orpheus goes to the underworld to recover his beloved wife, Eurydice. As they leave the underworld, he ignores the instruction not to look back, and Eurydice is lost to him forever. In the case of Lot's wife, the ancient tale has been cited to explain the peculiar salt formations that surround the Dead Sea. Having waited until he was 100 years old for the son and heir who would fulfill God's promise, Abraham is told by God to take the boy to sacrifice. Abraham never questions this directive in the Scriptures. He simply does as he is told, offering blind obedience to a God who would make him kill his beloved child. Even when the boy asks his father where the sacrificial lamb is, Abraham answers only, God himself will provide the lamb. Only as Abraham binds the boy, lays him on the altar, and holds the knife over him, does an angel stop him. Abraham is told that he has passed the test. He fears God. A ram is substituted for the young boy on the altar.
Would Abraham really have done it?
The story of Abraham sacrificing Isaac is a central moment in the Bible, but it raises a number of disturbing questions. Is that kind of devotion or obedience to a divine call acceptable? Would Abraham actually have gone through with it? And even as a test. To many people, it has always seemed an unnecessarily cruel test of faith. There is nothing that Abraham does in the story to suggest that he had any second thoughts about this divine request. He doesn't make the same kinds of arguments for his own son that he made for the citizens of Sodom, complete strangers. Sarah is also silent in this episode. Did she try to stop her husband? Did she know what he was up to? All interesting questions, but they lie in the realm of speculation. Of course, whether this event actually happened is also purely speculation, just like the very existence of Abraham as a real person rather than a mythic character. Maybe this episode was another legend designed to demonstrate what unshakable faith means, and that God had done well in selecting Abraham to be the founder of the chosen people. But there's another angle to this story. In some cults and religions of the ancient Near East, human sacrifice was still practiced at that time. In fact, Hebrew law even states that the firstborn offspring of humans and animals were to be offered to God. The aborted sacrifice of Isaac has been interpreted as a symbolic moment in which human sacrifice was rejected by God. Unfortunately, the practice didn't stop with Abraham. As the later history of ancient Israel shows, human sacrifice continued in Jerusalem for centuries. After Abraham's wife Sarah dies at age 127, he buries her in a cave in Hebron. Significantly, he purchases the burial land from the local people, the Hittites. And the verses elaborately explain the great measures Abraham took to stake a legal claim to this land. This is a crucial passage in real estate deals, which is viewed as a legal confirmation of possession of land that had already been divinely promised. In other words, God's word is one thing, but a deed is better in court. Abraham also realizes that his son Isaac should have a wife, but does not want a woman of Canaan. One more dig at the Canaanites by the Genesis author. In one of the longest narratives in Genesis, Abraham sends a servant back to his homeland. At Nahor, near Haran, the servant encounters a beautiful girl at a well. Again, there is a confusion of place and personal names. Nahor is the name of a town, but it is also the name of another of Abraham's brothers. The girl draws water for him, and Abraham's servant treats this as a sign from God that this is the girl for Isaac. She is Rebekah, the daughter of Abraham's nephew, Bethuel. Abraham's servant, older brother Laban, and in an elaborate negotiation, the two strike a deal for Rebekah to become Isaac's wife. After Sarah's death, old Abraham decides he's not done sowing oats yet either. He takes another wife, Keturah, who has 6 more of Abraham's children. These are the ancestors of other Arabic tribes, including the Midianites, who later figure in the story of Moses. When Abraham finally dies at age 175, he is buried alongside Sarah in the cave on the site he had purchased at Hebron. Another genealogy follows Abraham's death and traces the children of Ishmael, who also had 12 sons who were later organized into 12 tribes. Like Abraham, Isaac is promised the land and many descendants. He is like Abraham in another respect too. Once again, there is a famine, and God tells whom Abraham had an earlier dispute. In a tale that mirrors Abraham's lie about his wife, Sarah, to the Pharaoh, Isaac tells the local people that Rebekah is his sister, because he too fears he might be killed because Rebekah is so desirable. When King Abimelech sees Isaac fondling Rebekah in a field, he says, "So she is your wife. Why then did you say, 'She is my sister'?" Abimelech orders no one to bother Isaac, who goes on to prosper. King Abimelech is identified here, and in an earlier episode, as the king of the Philistines, the tribe that will play such a prominent part in the early history of Israel. This is another example of an apparent error in the chronology on the writer's part. The Philistines were part of the invasion of so-called Sea Peoples, and did not enter this area in large numbers until after 1200 BCE, long after these events would have taken place. Like Isaac's mother, the beautiful Rebekah is also barren, but she conceives and bears twin sons after Isaac prays to God. The firstborn is Esau. The second son, born gripping his older brother's heel, is Jacob. The common mythic theme of hostile twins is played out here as accounting for the two related tribes, the Israelites and the Edomites. Jacob, the younger, is a trickster, a classic mythic character, like Odysseus of Greek mythology. He becomes a shepherd and was favored by his mother. Esau is the hunter, slow-witted and easily deceived, but he is Isaac's favorite. Jacob first gets Esau to sell his birthright as the firstborn son for a pot of stew. In a more serious deceit, Jacob is prompted by his mother to trick his father Isaac, who is losing his sight. Rebekah cooks Isaac's favorite meal, then covers Jacob as hairy as Esau. Jacob tricks his father into giving him the deathbed blessing usually bestowed on the firstborn son. When Esau finds out what Jacob has done, he poignantly asks his father for another blessing. Isaac tells Esau that he will live away from the fat of the land and shall live by the sword. His father also says Esau will serve his brother, but that one day he will break free. After receiving this mixed blessing, Esau still threatens to kill Jacob.
What is Jacob's ladder?
Fearful that Esau may still try to kill Jacob, Rebekah schemes to have her younger son sent somewhere out of harm's way. In a story that mirrors the search for Isaac's bride, Jacob also sets off for Haran to find a wife. The narrative follows Jacob on a long journey, like that of the Odyssey, although not quite as perilous. The hero's wandering search, filled with mystical happenings and extraordinary events, and his eventual return home. On the first night of his journey, Jacob uses a stone for a pillow and dreams of a ladder reaching up to heaven. On it, angels are going up and down. God then speaks to Jacob, renewing the promise of land and descendants made to Abraham and Isaac. When Jacob wakes, he takes the stone he had used for a pillow and pours oil on it to sanctify this place that he calls Bethel, or house of God, and promises that the Lord who spoke to him shall be his God. He also promises God, as Abraham had done, to tithe, or give 1/10 of all he receives. While artists of the Christian era usually depicted Jacob's ladder, immortalized in a widely sung hymn, the original word for ladder can also be translated as ramp or stairway. Long before Led Zeppelin, in other words, the Bible was doing Stairway to Heaven. Abraham's son Jacob wants a girl just like the girl that dear old dad got. So he too goes to Laban, Rebekah's brother, as Abraham's servant did. And he also meets a beautiful girl at the well. Unlike Abraham's servant, who carried a lavish treasure as a bride price, Jacob is broke. He promises to work for Uncle Laban for 7 years to pay for Rachel. The plot thickens through a series of tricks played by each of the actors in this drama, which must have been popular as it was told around the campfires over the ages. On the morning of the wedding, Laban has his older daughter, Leah, dressed as the bride, veiled to conceal her identity, and she marries Jacob. Insists that he still wants Rachel, and promises to serve Laban for another 7 years if he can have her too. Laban agrees, and now Jacob has 2 wives and another 7-year hitch to serve. But he manages to keep busy in that time, siring a flock of children, even though his beloved Rachel is barren. First, Leah produces 4 sons. The envious Rachel gives her slave, Bilhah, to Jacob, and Bilhah has 2 sons. Leah, who had stopped at 4, wants more sons. So she gives Jacob her maid, Zilpah. She too produces 2 sons. Leah isn't finished after all, and has another 2 sons and a daughter. Finally, Rachel's infertility is cured, and she has 2 sons, although she dies in childbirth with her second son. Before very long, Jacob has a baker's dozen of children. Jacob, the trickster, gets his own revenge on Uncle Laban when they make a business deal regarding the herds that Jacob has been tending so successfully. Jacob and Laban agree that Jacob can keep all the spotted and speckled sheep and goats and all the black goats in the flocks. But in the night, the crafty Laban tells his sons to remove all the striped male goats, the speckled female goats, and the black lambs from the herds. Jacob has a few tricks of his own, though, and in a story that combines magic with some early genetic engineering, Jacob places striped sticks in front of the healthiest and strongest animals of the flock in breeding time. When the newborns arrive, the magical sticks have produced many striped, spotted, and speckled young. Jacob continues this process until he has successfully bred a strong herd of livestock that will be his, getting the better of his. Laban and his sons aren't happy about Jacob's ruse, and God sends an angel to Jacob, warning him to leave Laban's house. After 20 years of service to his uncle, Jacob sets off with his wives, children, and flocks, without telling Laban. Before leaving, Rachel steals her father's household gods, the small wooden or stone carved idols people kept around the house for good luck. Laban catches up to Jacob and his caravan and begins to search for anything Jacob might have stolen. Rachel sits on her father's gods, and when they come to search her, she tells them she is menstruating and can't get up. The household gods were idols, typical of the cults worshipped in Canaan and elsewhere in Mesopotamia. Small carved statues or fertility symbols, they were typically placed throughout a home, just as people still hang pictures of saints or crosses. Rachel hides these idols would have been told by the Israelites with derisive mockery, as Rachel sat on the idols in her time of uncleanness.
That was a lesson in Bible, the Old Testament, the Torah, Pentateuch, a lesson on the cutting edge. There's a lot of things that are said that was in the Bible, but this is all about education and all about viewpoints and all about recognizing things that you feel you know and you never really know. And that is what they have to do. If you open your mind, make you think. Critical thinking, them call it. Black History Month is on way again, and you know, say, continue to celebrate Black History Month, so we're going to carry through the pieces. Yes. The history, African view, and rational African logics. Years ago, when we read that story there about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Esau, and we realized that there was a man, well, according to them, there was a man by the name of Canaan who was the son of Ham. And them say there was Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And Ham uncover him father nakedness. And Ham and Noah wake up and never curse Ham, who uncover him nakedness, but him curse the son of Ham, which was Canaan. And then we hear now the story now where Canaan land, according to it, which is a land that is flowing with milk and honey, to control that land. And it continue over years in the story where the land again come under some really serious war. And then you have Jacob who decides they're going to control the land. And Ishmael claims say, well, Esau claims say birthright was stolen from him by Jacob with trickery. The mother tricked them. So that land, which is today now called Israel and the Palestine land, is used as a reference point in the name of God, Yahweh. Well, we did recognize it's not none of them land. According to the story, it's Canaan land. Get out Canaan out of the picture. Both the Arabs and the Israelis get out Canaan out of the picture when you hear about the land. So we went into the studio and we make this. Well, we wrote this poem and then we went to that studio and recorded the poem. So we want to hear this poem where we did record over the years about Canaan land. With help from Ibu Cooper voice. Yes, here goes. Yes, that was a poem written, I think was in the maybe late 70s, early 80s. But where we get to understand over the years now and going to certain places is that the same people who are called the Canaanites went down into Zimbabwe and South Africa. Yeah, that is where them tell me. So these people came down into Zimbabwe and South Africa. They dispersed. The Canaanites' land was taken away from them, according to that historical reference there. So, we see the land is drenched with blood and bodies. And now we see there's an impending war again. We say again because occasionally, something pop up, we create that light, that fire for light up again. Hezbollah, Netanyahu, all of these, Obama, all of these people represent the invasion of African people land, because the land of Canaan is in Africa. Geographically, we are telling you, say, the land of Canaan is in Africa. And all you hear them a fight and a fight and a fight. African people land them take away, rob and thief and murder the people them over the years. And we can't go to go say African people land. You're mad? If we go to say about them, say, boy, that's not Africa. That's a Middle East. And that's what they know, you know. They are Middle East, they move it from in Africa and put it in the Middle East. We can't go to go claim nothing. Because you have the Arab, them, there's more Arabs in Egypt right now than in Saudi Arabia. More Arabs in Egypt than Saudi Arabia. And when you check it out now, the face from in the days when them are write these things about Canaan and this and that, the face of Egypt change. So when one look at Egypt today, one of the one that said, then, oh, we are talking about Africa. Then, you know, say a pure white people live in Egypt. Then them not African too. Well, you have to check the history and recognize the invasion of Arabs into Africa and the slavery where the Arabs put the Africa into, which lasted much longer than the slavery where white people have Africans in her. And them control and manipulate the space to the point right now where you can't even, when you talk about Africa, black Africa, whatsoever, you can't even, it don't even look like you know what you say. Like you know what you say. When you start talking about Africa and black people, that's people that look at you look like you don't have no sense. But if you had only known your history, you'd recognize that Egypt, or Kemet, as we would call it, black. That's what Kemet is, black. If you would recognize that Nubia, and if you would recognize that Kush, Somalia, and all these places was inhabited by black people burnt by the sun, melanin skin. And that Africa was raped and pillaged by foreign invaders, including the Arabs. And now we see the majority of Arabs with them religion, and them religion now is creating havoc on the minds of African people. Both religions creating havoc on the minds of the people them. That people will die and kill and murder and burn people, at least burn down people place. in the name of these religions. What a terrible thing. What a terrible thing.